Hey guys, and welcome back. So, as you can probably tell by the title of this video is not going to be a happy-go-lucky, cheery video, because I'm going to be talking about recovery from having a C-section and being pregnant, because they're one in the, well, they're not one in the same, but you're recovering from both at the same time, especially if you had a traumatic C-section, or a traumatic birth in general, or a traumatic pregnancy, or a hard pregnancy. So I've made some notes about the things I would like to talk to you guys about today. So it's not going to be a jokey video. Immediately goes into anxious jokes. That's me. Okay, no, need to be serious for this video. Because it's a serious topic. So let's start with the most frustrating thing about my recovery in particular. Obviously this is going to be about my recovery, because I have no idea how anyone else recovers from being pregnant and having a child and giving birth. So the most frustrating thing that has been happening for me is the amnesia I have. I cannot remember most of my pregnancy and birth of James. And that is because I was anemic. The amnesia has really been getting to me because I can't remember the birth of my son. And what I thought took 20 minutes took nearly 2 hours. And it's so frustrating to lose that amount of time. Because, I mean, like, I know I was in labour for 32, or, you know, it's 32 hours from when my waters broke to James being born. But I know that for the first, like, 30 hours, I spent a majority of that asleep, you know? I was going to sleep, waking up, rolling over, going to sleep, waking up, rolling over. That was just kind of a pattern after I got my epidural in. And I know I was just stuck in bed because they put the catheter in and I was anemic and I was being given a blood transfusion. So I know I was just stuck in bed most of the time. There was nothing to remember. But the amnesia surrounding my cesarean is so frustrating because all I can really remember is hearing James cry, him being put on my shoulder, not handed to me because I wasn't allowed to hold him in case I dropped him, him being put on my shoulder, and then that's it, him being whisked away. And I spent a good, like, hour and a half on my own, because I discussed with my cousin beforehand what she should do if I was to have a cesarean, and I said to her, follow the baby. And that's exactly what she did. She did exactly as I asked, which is what I wanted. But it's scary being on the table on your own when there's no one around and you can barely articulate to get your point across. So when you have a cesarean, you don't feel pain when they're pulling the baby out, obviously, but you feel tugging. But for me, it wasn't painful. It was not painful. It wasn't uncomfortable when they were taking him and my placenta out. It was uncomfortable when they were putting everything back and sewing me up. That's when it got uncomfortable for me. And by that point, I was on my own. And at this point, I had no idea how much blood I had lost. I had no idea they lost a sponge at the time. All I knew was that my baby boy was born and then whisked away. You know, I saw him and he was whisked away to be weighed and checked and all that sort of stuff. And I remember saying to the anesthesiologist and the doctor, like, this is really uncomfortable, you know, this almost hurts. And they were like, we're almost finished. So, but that's what I can remember. Next thing I know is I'm in recovery, my son's being put on me, and then there's like 4 different nurses and midwives whizzing around me, like checking me, checking things, trying to get James to latch, and most of that day again is also gone. Like, I remember Callum coming to visit. I don't remember how long he was there for, and I forgot getting dressed. I forgot getting James dressed. I forgot all of this. So it's hard. The other thing is the hormones. The bloody hormones. Oh, they're horrendous. Horrendous, I tell you. Yeah, I probably should have said this. James is now 26 weeks old. I think. My phone's there. I'm pretty sure it's 26 weeks. Yeah. 26 weeks. And it's taken me this long to get to this point. So like I said, all this is frustrating because there's so much I wanted to be able to do that I just couldn't. I either physically couldn't or I mentally couldn't. I mean, I've suffered with anxiety and depression most of my life. I'm used to it. But after having James, that skyrocketed. Looking back, I probably did have a touch of postpartum depression, but I didn't see anyone about it. Don't do that. If you think that you're taking more than you can handle, see a doctor, get the help you need. Don't do what I did. So obviously I had anxiety about becoming a mum and you know, about James, if he'll be okay, if I'll do everything right, which, you know, as a parent you can never do everything right. I had anxiety about whether or not the cat would like James. I had anxiety about how I'd feel about James because I had so much trouble connecting. It's a lot, and then what comes with that is guilt, because you have all these emotions, but everyone always tells you, oh, you have a baby, be happy, you have a baby, be happy, just be happy because you have a baby. But, you know, it's not the case. Like, you can't just be happy because you have a baby, but then you start feeling guilty because that's what everyone's telling you. I'm not saying that everyone in my family did this. You know, most people in my family were understanding and were, like, tried to help me as much as they could, but, you know. Then, on top of all the emotions you're feeling, so the anxiety, the depression, in my case, anger, because my anemia wasn't caught and it ended in a C-section. I felt like my body didn't do what it was supposed to do. The one thing I didn't think I'd struggle with is what got me in the end and led me to a cesarean, and that was annoying, to say the least. Especially considering most of my pregnancy I'd had people in my life that had been pregnant that were like, oh, you'll be fine, you'll be able to do it on gas and egg, like, you'll be fine, you won't need the epidural. And then my waters broke and I was put on Pitocin, and, you know, and they were my contractions were so painful I had to have the epidural, and, you know, that made me feel like a failure. I was like, oh, I haven't been able to do what other women I know have done. You know, I've let everyone down. I've had the epidural. I've let my partner down. I've let my birthing partner down. I let my family down. You know, these are things that run through your head. Well, my head at least. You know, I just felt like a letdown. You know, I felt like I had failed as, you know, a parent, as a woman, essentially, because, you know, my body was designed to do this. It was built to do this, and it didn't. It just didn't. And then, like, there's the exhaustion, because, you know, you go through labour and then through surgery, and then you're expected to just jump straight into caregiver. And after my cesarean, my cousin hung around for a few hours with me to help me, because she'd had experience with babies. I hadn't. So she helped me. And then she said, you know, I need to go eat. Because I was getting meals at the hospital. Like, they were giving me food, but they weren't feeding my cousin. She was like, look, I really do need to go and eat. I was like, you know, go on. I'm fine here. And then when she came back, she brought Callum. And Callum was able to meet James, but Callum could only stick around for a couple of hours because of visiting hours, and I was on my own all night. And, you know, like, new baby, no idea what's going on. Woke every couple of hours, woke every hour. The hospital was noisy and people were rude, and, you know, my time on the ward was not as pleasant as my time labouring, funnily enough. While I was in a lot of pain labouring, I was in a lot of pain on the ward, but at least I was in my own room while I was labouring. And everyone that came into the room were very conscientious of what I was going through, and they were very polite. Almost everyone, actually. Evidently, I had a memory of one anaesthesiologist coming in and talking at me, not realising I wasn't taking in everything she was saying. To this day, can't remember a word of what she said, but I know she was just talking at me, talking about having an epidural. Thank God she was not the one that put my epidural in. It was the anaesthesiologist after her that did my epidural, thank God. And he was fantastic. But when I was on the ward, like, there was me and one other woman there, and there had been a delivery during the night, and this woman had come in to get the incubator, and when she was coming back in with another empty incubator, she crashed into one of the beds and woke both the babies and us up. And then it took us a good hour, 2 hours to get the babies back to sleep. Bear in mind, we both just had emergency C-sections and we were in a lot of pain and we were exhausted and on our own. So that was interesting. Again, so frustrating. And you know, all these things add up and, you know, equal a fair amount of anger around it. And, you know, and sadness, because I spent, how long was I in hospital? From when I went in to when I left with James, I think I was in hospital for 4, maybe 5 days. 4 days. I was in hospital for 4 days. That was 4 days I was away from my partner. 4 days I was lonely, essentially. 4 days I had virtually no one to talk to. I couldn't contact my family as much as I wanted to because I was running off my data. And you know, I only had a certain amount of data on my phone until they gave me the Wi-Fi code. And you know, I spent most of that time, I think I spent 3 of the 4 days in a bed because they were worried I was going to pass out because of my anemia. You know, it's a long time to be stuck in bed, especially hospital beds, because they're made of foam. I understand why they're made of foam and they're covered in a waterproof coating. I understand. But they're not comfortable when you've just had a cesarean or given birth. They're not comfortable. They're not fun. Just saying. So then there's obviously the pain of having a cesarean once your epidural wears off. I never thought standing could be so painful. That first time I tried to stand, which by the way, I was just left to do it on my own. You know, they put the sides down, took my catheter out and were like, yeah, go on, get up when you're ready. So, okay, fine. Got up, went to the bathroom. Never in my life thought it could be so painful. It felt like my organs were going to drop out of me. It didn't, obviously. But it was so painful. And the only pain relief they were giving me was ibuprofen and paracetamol. That was it. That was all I was getting. And then, thing is, it's not just the pain of recovering and like the 6 weeks that it's going to take you to fully recover for your scar to heal, blah blah blah. Yeah, it's not 6 weeks. I can promise you it's not 6 weeks, because I'm at week 26 and my pain has only just stopped. I still get twinges every now and then if I overdo it, which is just crazy. Like, oh yeah, 6 weeks you'll be up and at 'em. No. 6 weeks I was still bent over because I was in so much pain. You know, at some points it hurt just to lift James, and he was only 7 pounds, I think, when he was born. 7 pounds 9.5 ounces when he was born, which is just crazy. And it hurt to pick him up, and he was light as anything. You know, and now he's just a big lump. And, you know, it was just getting more and more painful to lift him. Now I'm a bit more recovered, it doesn't hurt anymore. But I've gone back to work recently, and my job is quite physically intensive because I'm a domestic cleaner. I clean people's houses. But it doesn't sound physically intensive, but it can be, especially when I'm having to move heavy stuff around a lot, because I help the clients organise their houses as well. So, you know, that like hindered my recovery when I went back to work, and I had to stop again and then go back again. And now my clients have an understanding that I'll only do what I am capable of, and right now I'm only managing 3 hours twice a week. It doesn't take 6 weeks to recover from a cesarean. It takes much longer. If it takes you 6 weeks to recover from a cesarean, fantastic. I'm so happy for you. But it took me a lot longer than that, and I wasn't expecting it to. Obviously, when it takes you a lot longer than what every single article on the internet says, you know, you start to feel like you're a disappointment. Like, you can't heal quick enough. Like, you can't do it quick enough. You can't recover fast enough for anyone, for yourself, for the internet, and that somehow you're faulty. And, you know, if you've gone through an experience like I did, where the reason you had a C-section is because your body failed you, you know, it makes you feel even more defective than you already feel. Stop giggling, this is serious. Stop it. Yeah, it makes you feel defective and like you're a disappointment to everyone. I have never had an issue with marks, scars, anything like that on my body, because it just shows what I've been through. So I have stretch marks on my stomach from not just the pregnancy, but from how much my weight fluctuated while I was a teenager. I have a scar on my leg from where I fell over once when I was like 6. You know, I have scars on my knees from where I was constantly falling over in my childhood and adolescence. Thankfully, I seem to have regained some of my balance. But, you know, I have scars all over my body. They've never bothered me. But for some reason, this one scar across my stomach does. I can't figure out why. Don't know why it bothers me, but it does. And I can't stand the sight of it. I can't stand the sight of it. Thankfully, because I am a heavy girl, I have a lot of overhang, so I don't see it a lot. But when I can feel it, it bothers me. And it's not like it's a ginormous scar. The scar is actually just about this long. Because it only had to get James's head out. James's head was a weird shape because he'd been in my pelvis for so long. So it's not very long. It's like 10 centimetres long, if that. And this one scar bothers me because it shows how my body failed me. I keep using words like fail and disgust and disappointment, but I don't think I can iterate enough how much this has affected me, having a cesarean. And, you know, this is going to affect the rest of the choices I have when it comes to having kids. Because, you know, now there's a thing in the back of my head being like, could I actually manage having a vaginal birth? Could I manage that? Could I manage that pain-wise? Would my body fail me again if I tried? Would I once again go through 30 odd hours of labour just to go for another cesarean? So do I go for the elective cesarean and get a positive cesarean story? Well, my cesarean story is positive because I got my little boy. It's obviously positive because my little boy is perfect in every way to me. I know obviously every mother thinks their child is perfect, but, you know, he's perfect in every way. And while some people sitting there wouldn't think that what I went through is traumatic, but it's the fact I can't remember most of it that bothers me so much. And now I have all these feelings and emotions about it, and I can't even remember most of it. And like stuff that happened early in my pregnancy that I had forgotten about. I recently watched my pregnancy announcement video. Me and Callum, like, I wanted to watch it because I was like, oh, this was like a year ago I posted this. I want to have a look. And I watched it. And there was stuff there, and I'm like, stuff that happened later in my pregnancy could have been completely avoided. Completely and totally avoided. I had low iron and folate at 10 weeks pregnant. But for some reason my anemia wasn't caught until I was 36 weeks pregnant. No, 38 weeks, because it was 4 weeks before I gave birth and I ran 2 weeks over. You know, and like, my midwife had told me I'd have 10 days worth of injections. I had 6 weeks worth of injections into my stomach. And in that video, you can see the change in me. If you look at me, because I lost like 3-4 stone while I was pregnant. And you can see it just in that first trimester. And I lost even more after that video, because I couldn't keep a lot down, but nothing was ever done about it. I was telling my midwife how often I was being sick. I was telling her how I felt, how I didn't want to eat. I went in there once and she was like, have you eaten? Like, she did the pea protein thing. She was like, have you eaten? I was like, well, no, because I've been so nauseous this morning. And she was like, you need to eat. But she never tried to help with the nausea and with the throwing up. You know, and then there was obviously like some not complications, but things that even my doctors weren't expecting to come up. So for instance, they thought I'd heal no problem, wouldn't have an issue, but I actually ended up on nerve blockers because my skull was getting so painful. They thought the nerve endings were just completely dead, would never heal again. But nope, they came back online, and that was painful as anything, so nerve blockers. And then, like, obviously on top of all this, you're trying to look after a baby, and James has obviously had his own issues going on, like I've been trying to sort out, and, you know, I always put that first. That was always what came first. And yet somehow it took my doctors 3 weeks to diagnose him with reflux. Reflux! It's quite funny, because everyone, you always hear the advice, sleep when the baby sleeps. Not possible. Not possible. Sleep when the baby sleeps. Oh yeah, sleep when the baby sleeps. Neglect the housework. Neglect my animals. You know, neglect my partner. Just forget about all of that. Just sleep when the baby sleeps. Not possible. I don't think I'm explaining myself very well in this video. I've had a lot of brain fog, as you can probably tell by the fact I can't keep a thought straight. Brain fog is partially because I have a cold and partially because I still can't remember the cesarean. Will this video ever see the light of day? I hope so, because this is real. This is raw. I feel like you only ever really see the, you know, like the positives or the not so bad side of having a baby, having a cesarean, giving birth, whatever. Or you see the super traumatic, there's something wrong with the baby, there's something wrong with mum sort of thing. You never see the ones that are traumatic specifically for mum. Because a lot of people may sit here watching this and look at me and be like, what are you on about? That wasn't traumatic. But it was traumatic for me. You know, I spent a lot of time on my own because of COVID. I was alone a lot of my pregnancy because COVID, and Callum had to work, so I was alone. I couldn't go to work because I was self-employed, and I wasn't essential because I'm a domestic cleaner. And, you know, in the back of my mind, I was like, this is going to be hard on my clients, you know? So I was like, you know, how are they going to manage? I need to get back to work as quick as possible, which in hindsight probably hindered my recovery a little bit. Obviously, there was everything that happened after James was born, which is, you know, like he had a tongue tie, and he had tongue tie, acid reflux. He wasn't latching because he had a tongue tie, and he struggled with feeding when he was little, and, you know, all this stuff. And at night I sit up and I'm like, could I have prevented that? If I had done something different while I was pregnant with him, could that have been prevented? Could he have been born with a not tied tongue, you know? You know, would that have made his life easier? You know, if I'd done something different during the pregnancy, would I have been able to dilate to 10 centimetres? Would his heart rate have kept dropping? Because that's why I had to have the cesarean. His heart rate kept dropping after every contraction I was having. So, you know, that's when it was like, okay, no, cesarean time. Because they probably would have let me go for a bit longer, because I was only 32 hours after my waters had broken. They like to, you know, they give you up to 48. So they probably would have let me keep going for a bit longer if it weren't for the fact his heart rate was dropping. So if I'd done something differently, would he have been a bit better? Or, like, in my notes, for instance, it says his weight was low for gestational age. I can't help but feel like that was my fault because I was throwing up all the time. I couldn't keep anything down, so I wasn't, you know, anything I was eating I was bringing back up. You know, if I had pushed further, you know, got the help I needed, even if I had known I needed help, I didn't think I needed help because, like, I just was like, oh, I'm pregnant, I'm just gonna be sick all the time. That's just what I thought, you know. And like a lot of, like, my mum said she was really sick while she was pregnant with me, and I was like, oh, okay, so just sickness is just, you know, normal. So, you know, and it's like a lot of stuff goes through your mind while you're recovering. And sometimes talking about it helps, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, I think it's helped. I know I'm probably just talking into the abyss. But if any of you are watching, just know you've helped a lot. I hope you guys found this video informative, at least. I wouldn't say, like, I hope you enjoyed it, because, you know, this is not really a video to enjoy. It's just a more informational video about what I went through recovery and how it's hard. And, you know, I wouldn't say I hope you enjoyed the video, but I hope you found it informative at the very least. And if you want to see some more videos, more quirky videos, then check out the rest of my channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.